congregants. Soon we will be celebrating the last 2 days of Pesach. And on the final day of Pesach, which this year is Thursday, we recite Yizkor. We will not be together in shul to recite Yizkor, but even an individual davening by themselves can say Yizkor, the memorial prayer that is recited on Yom Kippur, Shmini Atzeret, the final day of Pesach and the second day of Shavuot. And I wanted to share with you an idea for Yizkor this year, taking into account the unusual circumstances that we find ourselves in with the coronavirus. On this last Shabbat, Shabbat Chol HaMoed, the Haftarah was the prophecy of the dry bones. The prophet Yizkor is taken to a valley, and Hashem says to him, Ben Adam, son of man, what do you see? And he looks at the valley, and there are bones, thousands of them, and they are very, very dry. And he says to Hashem, I see these dry bones. And Hashem says to him, Ben Adam, son of man, will they live? And Yecheskel says, Hashem, only you know. And there Yecheskel is looking out onto the valley at these dry bones, and suddenly they form together, they knit together. They start to grow sinews and flesh and nerves, and they arise into living, breathing human beings. And Hashem says, this is the entire house of Israel. It's a very, very powerful, moving, inspirational vision, prophecy of Yecheskel. And it in fact is symbolic of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are always destroyed, laid waste. Genocides are perpetrated against us, and yet we are able to rise up. And of course, the greatest example of this was the Holocaust, where there were literally piles of dry bones, people who were like corpses, who would have died unless they just got a little bit of morsel to eat when the camps were liberated. And they went on to Israel to found a new state. These are the dry bones that come to life. But the Talmud is not satisfied with the conclusion of this prophecy. The Talmud in Sanhedrin gives a number of interpretations as to what happened next. One interpretation was, it was just a vision. That's all it was. It was a prophecy, it was a vision that didn't really happen. A second opinion says, no, this really happened. These people were resuscitated, they came to life, but then they died almost immediately. It was only temporary. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, one of the great sages, stood up in the study hall in the Beit Midrash, and he said, I take an oath that that was not what happened. These people got up, and they went on, and they formed new lives. They got married, they had children. They did many things to form a new community. And he says, the proof of the matter is these tefillin which I have. These are the tefillin of my grandfather, who was one of those masses who was resuscitated. Rabbi Beryl Wein, the great scholar and the historian, explains as follows. When we look at these type of images, when we look at suffering and tragedy, so some people look at it, it's a vision, it's something that sort of just passes. Then there are those who sigh a breath of relief and they say, I survived, I was resuscitated. But then almost immediately afterwards, they die. They just go back to life. Thank God we survived. But they don't rebuild. And then there's a third opinion. This is Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says that when we have lived through such a tragedy, the idea is not just to say, well, I survived, but to go on, to rebuild, to build Jewish lives, to build a Jewish state, and to reconnect once again to the Torah and the mitzvot of Hashem. These are the tefillin that I received from my grandfather, and I'm not just putting them in the cupboard, I'm still wearing them. And I think when we say Yizkor, we have to keep this in mind. We are remembering our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, those who have passed away. And the Jewish people take an enormous sense of pride in those who have come before them. And we take pride in the fact that they were learned people, they were pious people, they were connected to Hashem. But it's not enough. Will there be people one day who will say Yizkor for us? Are our children going to live in the type of way that we want them to live? It's not enough just to say, well, I survived, but to go on and to build a Jewish life. Yizkor is not just about the past and something that's happened, but it's about the present. There's an incredible halakha in the Talmud, and this is mentioned in the Code of Jewish Law, that if you have in a town two processions, one is a funeral procession, God forbid, and the other one is a bridal procession where they're walking with the bride towards the chuppah, and the two of them meet in the street, and one has to give way, there's not enough space, so one has to step aside. The Talmud says that the funeral procession has to step aside and give right of way to the bride. Yes, we value those who have come before us, but far more valuable than this are those who are going to continue on as Jewish people. When the coronavirus is over and when lockdown is over, we have to now have a recommitment, not just to remember what's happened in the past, but to use it as a motivation to build for the future. To say not just that we survived, but we thrived, and we're building a new and a better Jewish community together. I wish you all a Chag Sameach, and may the memory of all of your departed relatives, your parents, your grandparents, and all of those who've lost be for a blessing. Chag Sameach.